So in the last class, we had discussed about string processing, and this class I'm going to first half I'm going to discuss about exception handling, and if time permits, we'll see an example program also. So I think this concept is something which is not new to you. It's the same we have been learning in different languages. I'm just going to tell you how C# is going to show you exception handling. Okay, so in this class, all we are going to see is what are exceptions, how do you handle them, and what is this class system.exception in C#, and what are the different types and their hierarchy, and how do you raise or throw exceptions. That's what we are going to see today. Okay, I'm not going to go in depth of this because it's something, if I go in depth, it means that this is the first programming language you're learning. I know that this is not the first one, so since you already have an idea of how to handle exceptions in other languages including Java, C# would not be a different thing at all. It's exactly the same thing. So I'll just say what is C# part of it more importantly. Okay, so let's move on. Let's see what are first errors. Okay, there are two types of errors, as you already know. These are something which normally any human can make. Errors are mistakes that may produce incorrect output or may even terminate the execution of the program. Okay, there are different types of errors. You know that the warnings are not part of this. Okay, I'm just talking about errors. There are two types. One will actually do show that before even you could run the program, and certain things would run the program and then show you the error. Okay, you would have come across those words. Okay, the problem here is that one, your program should never abruptly stop. Okay, that's a good standard of an actual software, a good software. Okay, it doesn't mean a website or an app or whatever it is. It cannot abruptly stop in the middle. That is caused by these kind of exceptions. So you need to know this, and also make the system to crash. Okay, that is reduced nowadays because if you remember Windows 95, 98, I think even till ME edition of Windows, when there is one application which makes a mistake or if it crashes, your system would restart. Okay, I'm saying that that kind of highly malicious code was available with Windows, but now we have moved on to .NET, so the failure level is come down a lot. But still, it's the developer's responsibility to make sure that your programs do not crash or abruptly stop or make the system itself crash. Okay, like not responding and all those things. So there are two types of categories in that. One is compile time, the other one is runtime. Now, you all know what it is already. Compile time, it is when you compile the program. Okay, please note it's a C#, which means you have to compile. This does not apply for parsed languages. Okay, so I'm just talking about compiled languages. Compile time will show you some errors, which means it will not even allow you to form a bytecode. In that case, it's a compile time error, small, simple ones. Okay, that it's not a threat for a developer because you know when before compiling, if the program tells you this is the problem, you can easily fix it. So compile time errors are something friendly to us, but then runtime is something which we cannot expect. Okay, that's why we have a different word for that. But anyway, remember there are two types of errors: compile time, runtime errors. I'm just telling you the broad way. Okay, and what are compile time errors? Let's just have a quick glance of what and all possibly could go wrong when I write a particular code. Okay, number one and the most important one is semicolon. The thing is, when we deal with different languages, like for example, after working with Python, when you come back to programming, this would be a big problem for us. Okay, the reason is Python is an indentation based language. You can understand that easily by just looking at it. You cannot write or the entire Python code in one line. That's how it is structured, because it gives more focus to the indentation. Whereas C#, Java, these are all semicolon based, which means you can write the entire program in one line. It doesn't care because you tell when it starts and when it ends. You exactly specify where to stop the program. So missing semicolons are an error, but it will be thrown before even you could run the program, or when you cannot execute the program unless you fix this error. Semicolons, missing brackets, mismatch of brackets. Okay, all opening tags must have a closing tag in HTML or empty tags, but this is not the case in programming. In programming, brackets must match each other because it is where you start the program and you end the program. This is something which VB developers will know. For example, in VB, if you have written if, you also have to write end if. Okay, in C# and Java, you write if and you put a bracket. You have to close that bracket. That's all. So that's it. And misspelling, spelling of identifiers. Okay, for example, instead of putting string, if you just replaced one or two words here and there, it is not a keyword. So the keyword will not change color. It will throw an error. That's an error. That's a compile time error. Okay, and double quotes missing in string, use of undeclared variables. It's not allowed in any programming language which is like this. Okay, but it's allowed in VB. It is allowed in Python. Without declaring a variable, you can just assign it value because they don't have data types. Here you have data types, which means you have to declare a variable before using it. So use of undeclared variables is an error. And incompatible types in assignment. This normally we find when we take input from the user and we assign it to an integer. It is not compatible. It will throw an error. You will have to fix it by saying parse it. So all those things. Bad references to objects. Okay, without even instantiating a null object, if you try to assign something without even saying equal to new, which means without initialization, okay, instantiation, you are trying to access an object. That's a bad reference. And using this is something which everybody would have focused on. Equal to, equal to, equal to. One is an assignment operator, the other one is a comparison operator. But then since they both look a little bit similar, we tend to replace them. If you do that, that's also an error. It's not a exception. So these are some of the compile time errors. There are lots. I'm just putting some things which we normally come across. Let's go to runtime errors. What are runtime errors? When what and all happens during the runtime, which means you cannot predict it, but it will happen. That's a runtime error. Let's see what are those. Number one, dividing integer by zero. I think that everybody knows this is a common or a very famous runtime error, which means we do not know when the program would take the second value as zero. If you give that and you say divide it might throw an error. Not an error. It's not an error. While I wrote the code, I did not expect this, but when the user gave input, it might have changed. Okay, so and accessing an element that is out of bounds, array index out of bounds exception. That is something which commonly all developers would go through. Okay, this is people who don't understand the difference between index and length. Okay, they would find this issue. And trying to store a value into an array of an incompatible class or type. Creating a string array and then creating an integer array and trying to store a string in it or a character in it, that might throw these kind of exceptions. Passing parameter which is not valid. Okay, when you take runtime parameters, again, if this one is not valid, okay, most of the things will happen only if the user input is involved. If you are developing, you will know what are the possible inputs. But when I'm asking input from the user, there is a high chance that he might have misunderstood the question or might have given a wrong input. All these things would trigger only on the user's part of view. Okay, so anyway, attempting to use a negative size for an array. All right, this is allowed in Python. If you put -1, it gives you the last element, but here it is not allowed. Negative values are not allowed in the size of an array. Okay, sorry, not size, the index. All right, and using a null object reference as a legitimate object reference to access method or array. That's what I just said. Okay, you might have forgotten to say that new object name or new class name. In order to create a new instance, you need to use the keyword called new. But without using the keyword new, if you directly start, which means you have just initialized, you have not instantiated, but you're trying to access that initialized object to call a method or a variable without instantiating it. That also makes a exception, or in other words, runtime error. Okay, converting an invalid string to number, number to string, whatever it is, if it is invalid. Okay, now if I put 1.1.1 and then try to convert it into a number, it should not work because it's not a valid number to convert it into a string or a string to number, because 2 points are not allowed in a number. So those things are some simple things which the user might enter thinking that is right, and your program might not understand what the user has given. And accessing a character that is out of bounds of a string. Same thing as the array out of bounds. Okay, the word which is given to these runtime errors is something which is called exception. Okay, the reason is why these are called exception is it's normally we see some cases which are exceptional cases, which means they're not the normal one. They're a little bit different, and in this case, they are caused by a runtime error in the program. Now, when an error occurs like this, if the compiler is not sure, or when the compiler finds an error, which not the compiler, the CLR, the execution environment, if it finds an error, okay, and then it gives you, it creates an object of exception. Exception is a class here, and then throws it. If nobody is there to catch it, it breaks the program. That's all. Okay, so if the exception object is not caught and handled properly, your program, the CLR would display an error message and it will terminate the program. Please note that imagine that I've written 1,000 lines of code and the first 2 lines of code has an error. okay, or an exception. The user has given a wrong input. Instead of asking the user to enter it properly again, imagine if I broke the code, which means the remaining 900 lines are waste. We are not going to use it because one line was a mistake. Okay, so we should always ask the user to enter it once again after trying or after fixing that error. Okay, we should not abruptly stop or terminate the program. That's the idea of an exception. All right. So if you want a program to continue the execution of the remaining code, then we should try to catch the exception object thrown by the error condition and then display appropriate message for taking corrective actions. Remember that. Okay, this entire task we call it as exception handling. All right, handling exception, which means normally when we do the program, we don't bother about exception handling. But when should we bother about exception handling is when we are going to go into production, which means we are going to give it to the user and ask them to use it. At that time, this is a very, very important thing because you should predict all the possible problems which could come with the program if the user gives the input. If there is no user input, it's just like double click and it runs and it goes off, then it is fine. But if the user input is involved, you should find what are the possible issues which can happen with our program. I'll give you some examples, but then just see, have a glance of different types of exceptions which are available in C#. There are lots. I've just put a few so that we'll understand. Argument exception, argument was not valid. Arithmetic is or whatever is happening with numbers. Okay, divide by 0 is inside arithmetic, but specifically to one condition when you divide a number by 0. All right, and next one, index out of range. An array index is out of bounds. Okay, so if you try to create an array with 5 as the size, and you try to access the element of 5, that is wrong because it will create only 0 to 4 and you're trying to access 5, it is out of bound or out of range exception. Null reference, you're trying to use an unassigned reference. Okay, out of memory, this is there is no enough memory to continue execution. This is a very right now it is not much expected, but still you can expect this at any time. Okay, so out of memory exception. Last one, stack overflow. All right, you have heard the website, which is very famous, is also done with .NET. Okay, a stack has overflowed is the same idea. The stack data structure which stores the data here is overflowed, which means more than what is expected is stored there. These are some of the exceptions. There are lots. Okay, system given exceptions. Now, in Java, you would have seen the same structure. Try, catch, finally. There are three keywords which we normally use. All right, so in Java, it is a little bit different now. We have try with resources, but in C# it is just pretty simple. We have another way of using with resources. I'll show that in the later classes when databases start. But just look at this. Try, within brackets, you try the block of code which you want to execute. Catch is in case if the try block has any issues, it will jump immediately to catch block. And finally, it doesn't care whether it try block got executed or catch block got executed. Finally, will always get executed. There is not a lot of scenarios in which we use finally, but we will be using it a little bit more in databases. But just remember this syntax. Okay, I've just put an example. Just have a glance of these code which is put here. Okay, the first line, I'm trying to take an input from the user. All right, so and inside the try block, I'm trying to pass that number, whatever the user has entered, into a number. And I'm just trying to pass, I'm not even trying to store it anywhere. It's just trying to pass that string what the user has given to me. Now, the next line, what you see is if you have entered a valid number, I will parse it and there will not be any error. And I'll just print the next line, console.writeLine. You entered a valid number and I can print that. That's it. But in case if the user entered an invalid number, what should happen here? Okay, there are, I've written two catch blocks here. You can have any number of catch blocks. Now, there are two catch blocks here. Number one, format exception, which says that you have not entered a valid integer number. Next one is overflow exception. The number is too big. For example, instead of putting in.parse a particular number, I put my phone number there. I think it's an integer, but the system does not think so because it goes above the size what an int32 can store or integer can store. Okay, so that's too big, which means it's an overflow exception. All right, so this is the thing how normally try catch would work in every programming language. So there's no much difference here in C# also. Okay. This is something which you need to understand. Exception in .NET are objects, much as Java, but just think like, okay, if they are objects, there should be a class. All right, so what is the class? The class is system.exception. That's the class. All right, so system.exception is a class which is the base for all exceptions. This is the parent class, in other words, okay, in CLR, for all exceptions in CLR. and it contains information for the cause of the error or the unusual situation, whatever has been raised right now. Okay, exceptions are not normally brought up. Okay, it is something which we don't predict and it happens. Okay, we'll be ready for that. And there are certain things inside that exception class. Okay, number one is the message. This is the text description of the exception. Please note, this would be more technical only, which means that message might be very clear to you as a developer, but not so clear to a normal user. Okay, so just remember there is a message inside that exception class, and also something called stack trace. I want you to understand that word, stack trace. You have seen this a lot of times in Java, in JSP, what we are working with, and in Android when we worked with. In the logcat, you were looking for the error. Okay, it was not one line error. If you saw, that was a big block of code saying that these are the lines which caused the exception. First line would be more relevant to you, but there will be a lot of other things there. That part is called the stack trace. The logs which are kept in a stack data structure, okay, all those things, it just takes a screenshot or a snapshot of that and then passes it to you saying that this is what has happened in the stack while the program tried to execute. So it's a snapshot of the stack at the moment of exception throwing. And the last one is inner exception. Okay, if at all it is caused by current, if at all, this is if at all. Okay, it's not compulsory. The only one I'll be focused on is the message and the stack trace. But there is something called which caused the inner exception, the caused by the current exception. All right, so that might be a very rare scenario. We'll keep it there, but just focus on message and stack trace. All right. I've just put a program here. I want you guys to read it. Just go through it. I hope you can understand it. All right. And I want you to tell me what is the mistake in this program. Just go through it. I've made a mistake. It is on purpose, just to explain to you one concept. I want you to go through this and tell me what is the mistake I have made in this particular program. Just read the program. Please point out what is the mistake. Could you be a little bit more elaborate, Sean? Both the Seans. By the way, it's right, but can you just tell me why? That's the right answer, guys. What line they have pointed out is the correct place where the mistake is happening. But can you tell me why? Exception object must create exception as a class. Oh, no, no, no. That's not compulsory here. Okay, it's a general exception. It catches all exceptions. Hierarchy. Perfect. Okay, so that's what all of you are trying to tell in different ones. You are looking at the syntax, people, those who have given the exception as the error. Okay, the space, the object here is only if you want to access that object here. Otherwise, it is understood that this is the class which is taking care of the exception. So that is not an error. This program will still work. Object is not compulsory. Okay, if you want, you can keep an object because I'm not accessing that exception here. I put my own error here. So that would not be the problem here. Okay, and if you think that because I wrote like this without giving a space ex or e here, that is not the error I'm looking for. All right, the error what I'm trying to say is what Don and Nijisha have informed. I think Hansel also has told it's general. It won't check the other, correct. All right, so that is the exact word I'm looking for is the hierarchy. All right, the hierarchy is wrong in this particular program. What do you mean by hierarchy and why is it wrong? If you see that exception, I just told in the previous slide, exception is the base class. All right, so which means it is the parent class for all exceptions which happens in C#. All right, remember that. That's very important. Now, what I have done here is I have told exception to be the first catch block. All right, which means any exception that happens in the try, this catch block would catch it. Then what about the remaining two catch blocks which are there? Let's see that. That last, this one, the highest in hierarchy should be the last in catch. Okay, that should be the last. That's the problem or the error which we have made here. What about the remaining two exceptions? Okay, I want you to notice that word. It's unreachable code. Why is it not reachable is because whatever happens in this try block, this block will anyway catch it, whatever, all right, happens, because this is a base class and a child class is put after that. If the parent class is on top, this will anyway catch everything. Then what will come to that remaining child class is nothing. So this is unreachable code. Remember that. So how do I fix this problem? Put these two on top, put catch at the bottom, which means this is the parent that should be the bottommost. Okay, if none of those exceptions work, then this will be anyway catching that exception. That is the idea. Okay, remember that's the hierarchy. Just have a glance of this picture. I know it's not so clear, but then just get a general idea. On the topmost, you have the word called object. Okay, you can catch an exception, but if you want to interact and get the message, you have to get the object, because class is fine, but object is the one which you actually interact with. In my previous code, I never interacted with any of the uh, classes. If you see inside the catch block, I have never called the object of that exception. I just printed my own sentence, which means I don't care if you passed an E or an EX. It doesn't matter. So when you want to access that data of the exception which is caused, then you need to call the object which belongs to the class called exception. That's the base class. Okay, please note that is the base class. Okay, and then inside that in .NET, you have system exception. Okay, and the grayed out one is IO exception, which is also part of system exception, but directly it extends from exception. Okay, now what about the third one, which is here application? This is user defined. Okay, system defined a system exception, which means it already has a set of exceptions which they understand, they handle all those things. But if imagine I want to create my own exception in the class which is there, I can create something called application. That's coming from application exception, which means you are creating specifically for your application. But irrespective of your application, for all applications, system exception will be there. Inside system exception, I'll just take one. I'm not going to go about everything. Just see this arithmetic exception. All right, divide by 0 belongs to arithmetic exception, and arithmetic exception belongs to system, and system belongs to exception. All right, so see the hierarchy here. Okay, so however we have written here, when you write code, you should reverse the entire thing. This should be the entire complete reverse or reversal of your hierarchy when you write the code. When you show the hierarchy, it will be shown like this. For example, exception is on top. Below that, you have system. Inside system, you have arithmetic. In arithmetic, you have divide by 0. But when I am writing the code of catch blocks, first catch block should be pointing to divide by 0, and then arithmetic, and then exception. Okay, please note it should go in this order. What if I write arithmetic on top and divide by 0 below? Again, it's a problem, because arithmetic is the parent class and divide by 0 is a child class. Okay, always the parent should be bottom, the child should be on the top. It should be like this. Okay, when you write the code, this is the hierarchy of exceptions. We can throw our own exception. Now the diagram what I showed you has a lot of system exceptions which is predicted and it is expected to happen. Okay, so that is one. Apart from that, we can also create our own exceptions, and the ultimate base class should be exception. That is the only condition we have. Okay, and so the user defined exception classes must inherit from either exception class or one of its standard derived classes. Okay, so we can just throw that. I'll just show you an example that will be better. Okay, so let me just go to that code. Just have a glance of this. Okay, you can create your own exception. I've created a class called my own exception. Okay, please note that symbol colon means extends. In Java we use the word extends. In VB we can use the word inherits. In C++ you would put double colon there, but in C# it's just a colon. Okay, when you see that my own exception colon exception, which means my own exception is the class which I am creating. It extends from the base class called exception. Inside that, I created a constructor of that class, and this is the syntax of creating your own exception. Normally, we won't use it much, but in case you require it, just have a glance of this. Okay, so my own exception, and then pass a string to that particular exception. Just take that and then print it out. Okay, I've just put console. This is just an example of or syntax of how to create your own exception. Now let's see how to use this in my program. I put a simple program there where I use the I ask the user to give me a string, okay, a name. Let him enter a name, and if the name's length is greater than 15, okay, that is not something which is there in an exception handling. Whatever by default exception we have, string has unlimited length, okay, and basically unlimited, but then you cannot find errors in that. It's a string, and readline will return a string. I just stored it in as So there is no exception at all. But I have a separate condition in my program saying that the username cannot be greater than 15 characters. So I've written if s dot length is greater than 15, throw new my own exception, and then within brackets pass my own message. Okay, I've only put the message saying it cannot be more than 15 characters. At the bottom, you can see that the catch block, in catch block, I've written my own exception space ex. There I'm using the object because I want that object to give me the message. And then you see the next line, console.writeLine ex, that object dot message. Okay, that will return cannot be more than 15 characters. This is creating our own exception. Okay, rarely you would have used this, but I'm just telling this for your information. This is the syntax. This is how you use it. You can refer this when you create your own exceptions. Okay, that's it. And towards the end, we have try finally. Okay, and I wanted to just notice this code. I hope everybody knows what is finally block. It's as simple as irrespective of whether try block executed or catch block executed, finally will always get executed. In this code, if you see, parsing was successful, parsing was failed. Either way, this cleanup code will always be executed. Okay, please understand that that's finally. And when do we use this finally? That's a very important question. It's not recommended in all the programs, but there are programs which require resources. Okay, if you find programs which uses resources, that's a perfect block of code to write. Irrespective of what happens in try or catch, I would like you to close. Now, best example would be database connection. Imagine I open a database connection and then do some operation. Whether the operation is successful or the operation has failed, which means the try block executed or catch block executed, I don't mind. As soon as you finish the program, you have to close the database connection. Whether it is successful or not, it's a secondary thing. I want you to finish this block, and then after that block, I want you to close the database connection. So in finally, I'll write con.close, which means whatever happens in my database code, whether I've inserted, executed, deleted, whatever it is, I want you to close the database connection because I want others to continue using the database. This would be try, catch, finally. Now, towards the end, we just need to see a few more things like best practices. What you should keep in mind when you write try catch or when you do exception handling. Okay, number one, catch block should begin with the exceptions lowest in the hierarchy and continue with more general exceptions. Okay, this might not work out much with us writing programs here right now because we are not focused much on the user input, because we are the user, we are only giving the input, so we know how to give and how not to give. Okay, but please remember, when you go to an industry, you cannot ignore this. Okay, you cannot ignore exception handling and then just write a code and give it to people. Okay, it is not possible. You have to give exception handling. It's a compulsory thing when it comes to test cases. Okay, there'll be a lot of test cases with respect to your program. What you think might not always work. I think you would have got an experience with that HackerRank website, or what is that? I think the last interview what you had. Okay, you write a program. It might work according to your logic, but then when you try it with their test cases, all test cases might not be satisfied. Okay, there is something called the around the corner. Okay, all those things will be checked with respect to company level code. Here, best practice would be to put catch block in all important pieces of code where there is user input. That will be the first requirement. Okay, and it should go from lowest to highest in hierarchy. Otherwise, a compilation error will occur. Okay, and each catch block should handle only these exception which it expects. Now, normally we have, I think we didn't bother much about this because we were trying to understand databases. We're not trying to understand exception handling in the last semester. So everywhere you see that I've just used try catch and we use the exception alone. Okay, that's a very bad practice when it comes to industry standards. In college, yeah, it's fine to understand how try catch works with just one word called exception. Okay, handling all exception disregarding their type is a popular bad practice. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's a bad practice. That's all. I hope you understand. Okay, normally whatever we have written so far, just think about it. We just write try, catch, exception space E, and then we put E dot message. That's all. Or E dot print stack trace. That's all we put so far. Okay, I'm not saying that's completely wrong in a college level. At college level, it's fine. You just need to get the message, and after that, you can go and debug it. But when it comes to an industry level, that's a very popular bad practice, which means you cannot put everything on exception and expect the user to understand what the message is given. So when a problem comes, you need to face and you need to find out how to give it to the user in simple words. All right, you cannot use the integer is means stack overflowed or the array index is out of bound. This and all is not understood by a normal user. We understand what it is, but not by a normal user. So you cannot use that exception for everything. Okay, that's a very popular bad practice. Okay, when raising an exception, always pass to the constructor a good explanation message. All right, that message should be understood by everybody, not just by computer science people. Okay, be very careful of that. It should be a good explanation message, and they can decrease the application's performance. I hope that is clear to you. Okay, I know that exceptions are the exceptions normally decrease the application's performance. Exception handling doesn't. I hope you understand. Exceptions normally decrease the application's performance. Okay, so you should throw only when the situation is really exceptional and should be handled only in that kind of scenario, not for taking user input and then finding whether the user input is valid or not. That and all is not exception handling. What I did in my own exception is not an actually exception handling, just an example of it. Okay, I do not suggest that you use it for user input and stuff. That you should do it with programming only, not with exception handling. Now, this is something which nobody can predict. Okay, this is something which nobody will predict when they do a program. Okay, this is something which I think those who have worked with older systems will have come across this. Okay, even now in your system when you're running Android Studio with 4 GB RAM, okay, and you run the emulator also, how much of memory is remaining for the system to run? Okay, if you try to open one more bigger program while Android Studio and emulator is running, there might not be enough memory for that next program to occur. So, assuming that you all have great memory, I'm sending an application into the world, and when I try to launch that application, there is no RAM space to add this application which I'm trying to run. What would happen? Okay, normally, if you have not handled this exception, your application will crash. All right. But what happens when it comes to if I handle this memory, which means this memory exception, what happens is if at all there is no memory, I will just tell the message saying that there is no enough memory to run this program. Please stop some applications and then retry. I can tell that instead of just crashing that application saying not responding. Okay, that would be out of memory exception. When I say out of memory, I mean RAM is full. I cannot run this application anymore. That is not your application's fault. Remember that. That's the user's fault to keep so many applications in the RAM, and he's trying to access your application also. At that time, your application will be out of memory. And if you have not handled this, your app will crash. All right. So these are all best practices which you need to understand with respect to exception handling. Now, with this, I'll stop. We'll go to a program and we'll see. Okay. So this is the question, and I've just told A should be replaced by @ in the string, and whenever it finds these characters, it should be inserting a different character after that character respectively. And when it finds a blank space, it should print the length of the word. And so this is the this is the input we have given, and this is the output we are expecting. And I just told you to write the method alone. Some of you have not even read this question. You had directly wrote the entire program there. It's fine, not a problem. I'm just telling when it is asked, please look at the question and just follow that question. I have not mentioned about not using inbuilt functions, but I had that in mind. I did not put it. That's my mistake. Anyway, we just take this as the method name, and we are going to do I just showed no need for the main method, but if you are putting it, not a problem. All right. So let me just start. The question is to replace these characters wherever you find it in that sentence. But please note, case is not changed here when it comes to M or A or whatever it is. Okay. So let's do that in our code. So let me go back. I'm going to split this into 2 blocks. Okay, it's not required. You can write it in 1 block also, but I'm just keeping it simple. So let's create a simple method. Okay, so let me create a simple method which will replace the characters. That's the highlight of that program. If you notice, most of the things what it asks is just replacing. Replace this by that, replace this by this, all those things are there. So what I am going to do here is I am going to write a simple method. Let's say public, which will return a string. Okay, but what it will take is I'll just write it as replace character, and I'll take one. I'll take one character. Let me just name it as old character. Okay, please note this logic is only going to take one character as input, and whatever character you give, I'll replace it according to the logic what the system has given and return back a string. Why am I returning back a string? If you notice here, A will be replaced. So despite this particular method alone, you can use a character as an input and character as an output. But when it comes to the remaining ones, E must be appended with hash, which means I cannot return a character that time I require a string. That's why I'm using this. So let's create a simple switch case. Okay, I'll switch that old character, but please note, I don't want to bother about the case of that character. So what I'm going to write here is I'm going to call the character function and then say to lower the old character what you have passed. Done. Okay, and what we are going to do here is we are going to write one by one case. The first case is if it is A. Please note, what about small letter A? What about capital letter A? It doesn't matter, because anyway whatever is passed to me, I'll convert it into that and then return. Okay, instead of printing, I'll just say return, and I'll return at symbol. Now comes another question. What if he passed a capital letter A? What will you return? It doesn't matter whether it's small letter A or capital letter A. I'll anyway return at. So this is not a problem at all. But the next case onwards, it will be a small issue. Why? Because, by the way, please note, I've not used the word break here. Because after the word return has been encountered, break is not required. It's unreachable after that. Okay, anyway, I'm writing case. Next one is, what if it's an E? What should I do? Okay, please note, if it is an E, after converting the character which you gave me into a small letter, I got that. I need to return the character what you gave me with hash. That's I think that's the question. Hash, I guess. Okay, let me just write that. Return not just hash, but the old character what you have passed and hash. I hope this is clear. Okay, so old character is not changed into lower. Okay, here only only for the switch case I'm switching that character to lower case. But what is passed is still in capital letter or small letter. It's as it is. Take it as it is and attach hash with it. That's all. Okay, we'll just repeat this for whatever characters they have given. Even if they give more characters, we can do it. EMTI is what I felt. I think EMT and I guess. Let's change the characters. One is hash, one is dollar. I think the other one is I think percentage. All right, the other one is dollar. No, ampersand. Okay, so these are the characters. Okay, what if a normal character comes apart from these characters? What if a normal character comes? Okay, which is not any of these characters. What should I do? Return that old character as it is. But since it's a character, I'll just put this. Now, if you see that the break is called something, okay, if you can see the code there, the break is an unreachable code, which because return statement is already gone. So I need not write the break statement here. I can remove it. That's all. The logic what they have asked, I have done here. Only thing is I need to put them into practice. Okay, I wanted to just have a look at this particular switch case. Okay, switch case has taking that character to lower and then finding out all these conditions and attaching with the old character without converting and then adding the symbol whatever you ask. That's all. Okay, that's all we have done here. Now, I wanted to notice that this is a code what I've written in the traditional way of writing a switch case. In C#, there is one more way of writing switch case, but I think it's not required for you to understand that, but this is a little bit more clearer structure. Now, I can make it shorter, even shorter. If you just move your mouse there, you see there is another word called use switch expression. There's a potential fix available. Let me just show you how it would look like. It would look like something like this. Okay, this is the traditional switch case replaced in an expression format. I hope you can see the code. This is a simple logic. Return character dot to lower old character switch. What? If it is A, return this. If it is E, return E with the hash, added with the hash. And it goes on like this for all characters. If it's not any of those, then just send old character plus blank. This is one way of writing a switch case. And the traditional way what we have written is this way. Either way, it's fine. Okay, I just showed you that other way of writing in C#. It's called an expression way of writing a switch case. But this is also fine, whichever is clearer to you. Okay, I feel this is much clearer because the other one requires a little bit more knowledge of C#, but this is fine. The switch case is also available here, so we'll keep it as it is. So I have written a simple method called replace character inside the same class. Now I'm going to write the actual method now. It's much simpler now because I already have the replace code with me. I'm going to write next one is public string encode message. This is the one which I told you to take it. So I'll be taking one parameter as the string which is given to me. So if you give a string, I'll encode it using that logic what you have given and then return it back to you. So how do I do that? Okay, in order to do this, one, I'm going to take a result. So first, let me fix that error by just saying string result is equal to double quotes, just blank, and then return that result. I'll write everything between them. Okay, so I hope this line is clear. Why I've written that is because I wanted to remove that error. So I'm creating a result which I'll be manipulating and then returning at the end. Okay, so let's try. What should I do? Now, please note, if I'm just replacing without bothering about that count, then I just have a simple way of writing. I can just write for each character item in that given string. Okay, for each character in the given string, all I need to do is I just need to print out, or I can just say result plus equal to, okay, I just need to call replace character, that method which I called, and pass that character as an input. This is enough if I have, I am ignoring that count. So in program, if you see the code, what I've written is enter a string, okay, and I've not called that function here. So already function is here. I'm going to call f dot, you see that encode message is there. I'll call that encode message and give whatever the user has passed to me. Done. Now let me run the program and let me check. Okay, if you notice that I've got the output what I'm looking for without one thing. Okay, I've got the expected output exactly like how I have given the output here. If you see the output, it's exactly the same, but only one difference is there. The difference is the number is missing. Okay, that's all. So our logic part, half of it is done. The remaining half is very, I think it's clear for you. It's possible to do it in a simpler way. It is up to you. Okay. Now I just need to make sure that I also attach the count at the end of that particular character. So if you are using inbuilt functions, I can split that using the space in the middle and then cut the count of the characters and then print it. All those things are fine. But since I'm assuming that the inbuilt functions are not allowed, I'm going to do another way. I'm going to create each word in a temporary string. So I'm going to create string temp is equal to blank. And then what we are going to do. Okay, so I'll leave this as it is. Instead of result, I'll not concatenate to the result directly. I'll just say concatenate to the temp every time. So every time you go through one character, add that character to the temp. But the moment you reach space, you need to change it. Okay, how do I change it? So I'm going to write a simple if condition here. I'm going to say if the item the character which you have passed is equal to space. If it is equal to space, what am I supposed to do? Okay, if it is space, I need you to attach whatever the temp has collected so far. Okay, imagine that, just take this as an example. All right, so imagine this is the character. I take W. If it's not space, so I'll add W to temp and then I'll loop it again. E, I'll replace the character and then attach it to temp, and it goes on like this till it reaches that space. When it reaches space, what would you like me to do? I want you to add this word welcome, which has been now replaced, okay, to the character, the result as the output, and then also attach the length of that temp. Okay, that's much simpler. So I'm going to just say right now temp has the word welcome. When you reach space, I want you to find the welcomes, transformed welcomes length, and then attach it. So I'm going to say temp plus equal to temp dot length. Done. Which means whatever character you have got so far, attach the length also to that character. And after that is done, add that result to your temp. Okay, and since it's space which we are checking, I need the space again back, so I'm going to just put space here. Okay, the reason why I've done this is since it's a space, I'm coming here, I'm not going to add this space again to the next character because the count would go wrong. Okay, you can remove this and check what the output would be if you have time. Okay, then once that is done, I'm going to replace that temp or reset the temp back to empty. And I'm saying please don't continue, because after space is given, if I continue, space also will be added to that temp character. I don't want that, so don't continue with I want you to continue with the loop, don't continue with the program. Okay, so I'm going to say continue, which means stop the loop, this particular loop, and then go to the next iteration. So it will go to the next character. It will go to T. All right. So I hope this is clear. Now if I run the program, I'll get somewhat right output, but not exactly the right output. Let me just show you what I'm saying. You can see that my output right now has welcome and to, but I'm not getting the last word, AIMIT. The reason why it is not happening is because it is breaking based on the space. There is no space after AIMIT. So since nothing is there right now, this entire character which is encoded will be stored in temp, but it will not be attached to the result, because inside the loop only we have done this much. So what will be the obvious answer? Just come out of the loop and then add. By the time when you come out of the loop, you have reached the last character. Just add that last character back. So I'll just take this. Okay, so I'll just say temp plus equal to temp dot length, and also result plus equal to temp. With that, our work here is done. Okay. I hope you got the logic. You can go through it by looking at it. You can take whatever logic you want. I just wanted to say there is a simpler way also. Here you've got the output. What we are expecting, we got that same output. Okay, so the word, encrypted word is here without bothered about the case here. Okay, and then the count of that particular word is put, and then you have words 3, and this entire thing A is replaced, I and M is I, M, I, T alone is left, and then I think T also is added, and then you see AIMIT, which is a 5-letter word, has now changed into 9-letter word because 4 of those characters were replaced with symbols. So anyway, that's it. We have got the output as we require. Okay, so this is one way of writing the same code what you have written. You need not bother about it much of what internet has to say. Okay, you can think of your own and create your own logic if you you understand how this logic goes, right? So please do work it out before you start writing the code or copying the code from the internet. Okay, if you take the code from the internet, also you find a way in which you can simplify it, not more complicated. Okay, I think some of you have done it very well. I just like the code, the idea what you have given. Most of you have given split the code. Others have written in the same program. It's fine as long as it's yours. I'm very happy about it. But please don't try to take it from the internet, guys. I'm repeating it again. Okay, if you can't do it, just take your time. I would have extended the time to even 1 week if you had asked. Okay, but I think some of you submitted just because the time is there and you uploaded the code. It doesn't matter. From the next code onwards, take your own time, but please try to do it on your own, not take it from anybody else or from the internet. Okay, I think with this we will stop for today. Please wait till I take attendance and then we can discuss.